Duke's got to go quickly. O'Neill trying to get to the left hand. He does. Lavelle with the stick check. And Penn has knocked off #1 Duke.
Duke attackman Brennan O'Neill may be the best player in college lacrosse, but on a rainy Friday night in early March, during an upset loss to Penn, the reigning Tewaaraton Award winner looked oddly human. Coming into the game, O'Neill was averaging over 4 goals per game, but in the loss to Penn, he went just 1 for 8 shooting and had 2 turnovers. After reviewing the entire game film, multiple factors played into O'Neill's underwhelming performance against Penn, but when it came down to crunch time, O'Neill simply came up short in his head-to-head matchup with unanimous first-team All-Ivy League defenseman Brendan Lavelle. Before we dive into his matchup with Lavelle, let's talk about one factor that can't be ignored: the rain. Weather can be the great equalizer in lacrosse, and it was pouring at Koskinen Stadium when Penn visited Durham on March 1st. O'Neill seemed particularly out of sorts in the driving rain. You could see it on a couple of his early shots. Take this one for example. Have you ever seen O'Neill miss the net by this much?
O'Neill had his shot altered.
Immediately after that shot, you could see him feeling out his pocket. On O'Neill's next shot, you have to wonder if he took a little bit off of it because it looks slower than usual, and Penn goalie 𝐓𝐇𝐄 makes an easy save. Another factor that limited O'Neill's impact was his overall tentativeness to initiate and quarterback the offense. From the beginning, O'Neill was quick to pass the ball off and let teammates like Josh Zawada or Andrew McAdory generate most of the offense. After Penn held him scoreless in the first half, the broadcast crew started calling O'Neill out for being too passive.
Like right now, he can run off the end line and pick up that ball, right? Like he can get goal line extended. He hasn't touched the ball in this half. Brendan O'Neill is one of my favorite players that I've ever watched in college lacrosse. My one knock on him can be that there's times where he removes himself from the game to some degree. He does, and again, I think part of that's trying to get his teammates involved and make sure the flow is there. But now is the moment. You need your best player to make the play to get you back involved offensively.
Ironically, right after they say this, Brennan O'Neill scores his only goal of the game, a crease finish assisted by Zawada while O'Neill was covered by a short stick.
Cat and mouse with Blake, feeding O'Neill, who finally gets his first tally of the game.
When covered by Brendan Lavelle, O'Neill wasn't as lucky. For most of the game, Lavelle was glued to O'Neill, and when O'Neill did gain a step, 𝐓𝐇𝐄 positioning in net was impeccable, giving O'Neill almost nowhere to shoot the ball.
That was Penn defense. They've played a lot of ball together.
Duke did set some decent picks against Lavelle, but Penn always countered by jumping O'Neill aggressively, which gave Lavelle time to recover and settle back into his matchup.
Lavelle's been a menace on defense. Forces O'Neill to give it up.
Heading into the fourth quarter, Duke trailed by 4, and it was obvious that O'Neill needed to take this matchup into his own hands. But Lavelle rose to the challenge and clamped down on O'Neill with the game on the line. With 10 minutes left, O'Neill slipped while dodging off a restart, and Lavelle capitalized by taking away his stick.
Lavelle helicopters it away from O'Neill. He's able to get it back. They're going to call him for playing without a stick. It's a procedure call.
A few minutes later, O'Neill lost his footing again. Lavelle was there to force the turnover and get the ground ball.
Hits the turf. Lavelle jars it loose. Bodies flying, and Lavelle comes up with it.
Notice how Lavelle is barely fazed by the pick from McAdory and able to put just enough pressure on O'Neill to make him lose balance. Around the 2-minute mark, O'Neill lands his final shot on cage, but Lavelle is all over his hands, and Carroll stands tall to make a clutch helmet save. Finally, with time expiring and Penn up by 2, Lavelle lands a trail check that squashes O'Neill's last-ditch effort.
Lavelle with the stick check! Zawada on the ground, Duke in the crease, and Penn has knocked off #1 Duke.
As the final horn sounds, the celebration begins for Penn. Lavelle finishes the game with 2 caused turnovers, both in the fourth quarter, and a total of 6 ground balls. An outstanding individual performance. A player as great as Brennan O'Neill, though, doesn't stay down for long. 2 days later, he bounced back with 2 goals and 2 assists in a blowout win over Princeton, while Penn lost to North Carolina. So, was it the weather? Maybe it was a favorable matchup, or just a lucky night for Penn. Unfortunately for the rest of college lacrosse, the blueprint for shutting down Brennan O'Neill remains a mystery.